So last week I made a video talking about all the different things that I like more about the Switch 2 than the Steam Deck. And honestly, it's a pretty fun comparison to make because these two systems are as similar as they are different. One is a more traditional console, while the other is a fully fledged PC. One has two detachable mice, while the other has built-in touchpads. One plays all of your Nintendo favorites, and the other, well, admittedly can also play a lot of your Nintendo favorites, but maybe we just skip over that part. The point is, there's a lot of overlap between these two systems. But despite all of their commonalities, just like there are things that I like more about the Switch 2 than the Steam Deck, the same is true in the opposite direction, and that's what today's video is all about. And just like that last one, I'm going to go in the same general order by talking about hardware first, then the general usability and experience, and then finally the gameplay experience, and the things that I like more about the Steam Deck than the Switch 2. But keep in mind this is all just subjective opinion, despite a few overt advantages I think the Steam Deck has over the Switch 2. So if you have your own reasons for preferring one platform over the other, I definitely would love to hear about it, so please do let me know in the comments below. But for now, let's just go ahead and dive in and talk about hardware first, and I wanted to start with comfort. Because despite the fact that I mentioned that the Switch 2 was more comfortable than the Steam Deck, it's also a little bit less comfortable. And to give that a little bit more context, while I definitely prefer the form factor of the Switch 2 in so much as it is thinner and lighter and a little bit more evenly balanced, I would say, than the Steam Deck, it's not necessarily more comfortable. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward. Despite the fact that the new Joy-Cons are certainly more comfortable than their predecessors, they're still nowhere near as comfortable as holding the Steam Deck, which feels more like a traditional game controller. Despite the weight advantage of the Switch 2 being better for longer play sessions, the actual feel of those controls on the Steam Deck and analog stick placement is way better. Sure, it's a beefy boy by comparison, but with those extra curves come extra comfort. And while I may be more prone to actually resting the Steam Deck on something whenever I play it in portable mode, actually reaching each of its controls is a lot easier, and more akin to a console controller, what with its more traditional placement and larger, taller analog sticks. And beyond the raw comfort of playing portably on the Steam Deck versus the Switch 2, I have to say, even though I don't technically like the experience of going from portable to big screen mode better on the Steam Deck, I definitely appreciate the increased flexibility it has for working with different docks. Because really, you can hook up just about any dock that you want with it. Whether it's the OEM dock, which I'm actually pretty fond of, or any random USB-C dongle that you have laying around, the deck just gives you more options for getting to a larger screen than the Switch 2 does. So while the actual process of docking may not be as smooth as the Switch 2, it's definitely easier to find docks or really other peripherals that just work better right out of the box than what you're really allowed to do with the Switch 2. And honestly, that expanded range of accessories that just work out of the box with the Steam Deck is kind of appealing compared to the Switch 2. Now obviously there's no shortage of first or third party accessories for the Switch 2, but for the Steam Deck, just about anything you can throw at it will work, whether that's, controllers, arcade sticks, external monitors that don't require a dock, or something as fancy as those Vitro Pro glasses that I've mentioned multiple times on the channel at this point, which you can just plug directly into the Steam Deck without the need of some intermediary piece of hardware. Also, I do have to say one more note on portable mode. I really appreciate that there are two sets of rear paddles on the Steam Deck, but there's none on the Joy-Cons for the Switch 2 when you're in portable mode. I've gotten pretty used to reprogramming those rear paddles on the Switch 2 Pro controller, and then when I switch back into portable mode, not having them is kind of a drag, whereas they're just built right in on the Steam Deck, which is a feature that I actually like more than I thought I would. And while we're on the subject of controls, let's go ahead and move on to the general experience and usability. And one of the things that I love most about the Steam Deck is the fact that you can just download community layouts for your controller options. I mean, sure, you could individually remap every single button. I think you can actually do that on the Switch 2 as well, but the fact that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time if you need a more optimal layout for a game, knowing that the community has made tons of different layouts and you can just find one to your liking without having to go through and sort of manually set every single one of those options, really is a nice feature on the Steam Deck side. Also, beyond the flexibility for customizing your controls on the Steam Deck, I really love the outrageous amount of flexibility that you get for the interface and arranging your games the way it makes sense to you. I mean, sure, the Switch 2 does let you use collections, but by comparison, if you're talking about the different ways that SteamOS lets you organize your games, it's basically supercharged by comparison. You can just sort your games in so many ways on the Steam Deck way beyond alphabetical or last played date, like added to library, installation size, release date, and not to mention you can use things like dynamic collections to have automatic groupings of games populate as new ones get added to your library. Or if you want to completely overhaul your interface with something like Decky Loader to give yourself better access to info on games or actual themes, which as of now the Switch 2 does not have, you're free to do just that and pretty much any other customization you can think of. Which is to say, you're not very locked down by the OS at all. But by far I would say my personal favorite experiential advantage that the Steam Deck has over the Switch 2 is that the shopping experience is way better. Now I've already mentioned that the Switch 2 had great improvements when it comes to their eShop. It's faster, it's snappier, and that's all great, but it has one crucial weakness compared to Steam's marketplace, which I didn't even really notice because I hadn't bought a ton of digital games for the Nintendo Switch in the past, but you can only buy games one at a time. Meanwhile, on the Steam side, you can load up 50 games in your cart if you want, kind of look at how many deals that you're taking advantage of, and then make an informed decision. Meanwhile, if you try to buy 50 games over on the Switch 2, you have to go through each one, buy them one at a time, and then kind of repeat the process. Which, even though I appreciate that Nintendo leaned into a summer sale this year, which was great and I got some really good deals, it's pretty cumbersome to go back and just click through the entire buying process one at a time for like half a dozen games if you're trying to get some deals. Maybe that's part of Nintendo's big master plan, is maybe they think that if I just buy games piecemeal that I won't really see how much of my expendable income is getting hoovered out of my wallet by them during a particular sale, but honestly, I don't know why they haven't fixed this yet, or why they haven't just made it so you can have a true card system like pretty much every other marketplace on the internet. But enough about hardware and OS and usability, let's talk about the actual gameplay experience and getting to those games that you've purchased. And I have to say right out of the gate, the biggest advantage that Steam has over Switch 2 is its flexibility. Because even though I often praise Nintendo for its friction-free, sort of ease-of-use walled garden experience, the caveat for that is you have almost no control over what you can do with the system or the games that you've purchased. And on the Steam Deck, for starters, I don't even have to buy games directly from the Steam Marketplace. I can load any number of marketplaces onto the Steam Deck if I would like, and get games from a variety of sources, completely unchecked if I'd prefer. Whether that's Epic Games, Green Man Gaming, Good Old Games, Game Pass, non-Steam application, indie games you could just download randomly from the internet. I mean, just about anything you can think of that you would like to play on a portable device can be played on the Steam Deck in most cases. And I kind of teased this at the beginning of the video, but that's also to say nothing about the wide range of emulation abilities that you have on the deck, whereby you can emulate pretty much every Nintendo console ever, PlayStation consoles comfortably up to about the PlayStation 3, basically every Sega console that ever came out, and of course just about every portable device that's come out in the past 35 years. And sure, Nintendo's approach to emulation through NSO is pretty solid, and it's cool that they do let you play GameCube games now. But you'll also only be able to play the GameCube as they say you should play, while on the Steam Deck you can play pretty much every GameCube game, and that is a pretty shocking value proposition. But putting aside that you can play games from just about anywhere on the Steam Deck, you also have abilities to tweak for performance or for quality in ways that extend way beyond just choosing a performance or quality mode like you might do in games on the Switch 2. For instance, if you play a lot of visual novel games that don't need a high frame rate, that's totally great. You can cap your frame rate at the system level to 15 FPS and extend your battery life to ludicrous degrees. Or if you want to supercharge Alice Madness Returns beyond its 30 FPS cap to 60 FPS, by all means edit the engine.ini file and go to town. Or maybe you just want to play your PlayStation 5 remotely without shelling out $200 for a PlayStation Portal to do that, in which case just fire up Chiaki and have yourself a great time. The Steam Deck is just overflowing with ways to get to your favorite games, and more so allows a ton of flexibility in tweaking them to make sure it plays the way you want them to. And that's an experience and freedom that you're never going to get from Nintendo on their consoles, unless you modded your console, but if you do go that route, there's at least a non-zero chance Nintendo might try to brick your system remotely if you take it online, so at the end of the day, the Steam Deck is still like this incredible buffet of your gaming history that can be at the ready at any time, and is subject to way less restriction than what you have on the Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, to wrap this whole thing up, both systems are great, but both certainly have their pros and cons. And even though the Steam Deck might add some friction in terms of tinkering or doing a scary dive into some system files every now and then, the flexibility that it allows you really can't be overstated, and that's why it's a device that will never leave my gaming rotation, even if it does occasionally go dormant for a while. But this is just one guy's opinion, so what about you? If you have the Switch 2 after having played the Steam Deck for a while, is there anything that you've noticed that you demonstrably love more about the Steam Deck than the Switch 2? If so, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. As for what's coming up on the channel, I'm going to try to get back to doing some emulation content, and then beyond that, I'm also probably going to do some list style videos for the Switch 2, so make sure you stay tuned for those. As always, thank you so much for your time and hanging out here with me on the channel watching videos. It really means a lot to me. Have an amazing day, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.